September 11th, 2001 began as an ordinary Tuesday morning in the United States. Millions of people were commuting to work, boarding flights, and starting their daily routines. Nothing about that morning suggested that it would soon become one of the most tragic days in modern history. Within just a few hours, coordinated terrorist attacks would take thousands of lives and permanently change the way the world thought about security, terrorism, and global conflict. This is a short video story of what happened on 9/11, how the events unfolded, and how their effects are still felt today. Before the attacks, the World Trade Center in New York City stood as one of the most recognizable landmarks in the United States. The Twin Towers were symbols of global finance and economic power, with thousands of people working inside the buildings every day and the complex attracting visitors from around the world. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the Pentagon served as the headquarters for the United States Department of Defense. It represented the center of American military planning and strategy. It was for these reasons that these locations would later become the targets of a coordinated terrorist attack carried out by members of the extremist group al-Qaeda. Early on the morning of Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, 19 hijackers took control of 4 commercial airliners, 2 Boeing 757s and 2 Boeing 767s. These large planes with long flights were selected for hijacking because they would have more fuel in their tanks. The 2 767s were originating from Logan International Airport, both en route to Los Angeles International Airport, that being American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767-223ER, which departed at 7:59 a.m. The second 767 was United Airlines Flight 175, a 767-222, which departed at 8:14. American Airlines Flight number 77, which departed at 8:20 a.m. from Washington Dulles International, also en route to Los Angeles, with the final one being United Airlines Flight number 93, a Boeing 757-222 departing from Newark International at 8:42 a.m. en route to San Francisco International Airport. These flights appeared normal at first. Passengers boarded as usual, and the planes took off without any immediate signs of danger. However, shortly after takeoff, the hijackers seized control of the aircraft, with the goal of using them as guided missiles. 15 minutes into the flight of American Airlines Flight 11, 5 hijackers armed with box cutters took over the plane, injuring at least 3 people and possibly killing 1 before forcing their way into the cockpit. The terrorists also displayed an apparent explosive and sprayed mace into the cabin to frighten the hostages into submission and to further hinder resistance. Meanwhile, Flight 175's journey proceeded normally for 28 minutes until 8:42 a.m., when a group of 5 hijacked the plane, murdering both pilots and stabbing several crew members before assuming control of the aircraft. These hijackers also used bomb threats to instill fear into the passengers and crew, also spraying tear gas, pepper spray, or other irritants into the cabin to force passengers and flight attendants to the rear of it. Concurrently, United Airlines Flight 93 departed from the airport in New Jersey, originally scheduled to pull away from the gate at 8 a.m. The plane was running 42 minutes late. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 was crashed into the north face of the World Trade Center's North Tower between floors 93 and 99. The initial presumption by many was that it was an accident. At 8:51 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 was also taken over by 5 hijackers who forcibly entered the cockpit 31 minutes after takeoff. Although they were equipped with knives, there were no reports of anyone on board being stabbed, nor did the 2 people who made phone calls mention the use of mace or a bomb threat. Flight 175 was eventually flown into the South Tower's southern facade between the 77th and 85th floors at 9:03 a.m., demonstrating that the first crash was a deliberate act of terrorism. 4 men aboard Flight 93 struck suddenly, killing at least 1 passenger after having waited 46 minutes, a holdup that proved disastrous for the terrorists when combined with the delayed takeoff. They stormed the cockpit and seized control of the plane at 9:28 a.m., turning the plane eastbound towards Washington, D.C. Much like their counterparts on the first flight, the fourth team used bomb threats and filled the cabin with mace. 9 minutes after Flight 93 was hijacked, Flight 77 crashed into the west side of the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. Because of the 2 delays, the passengers and crew of Flight 93 had time to learn of the previous attacks through phone calls to the ground, and as a result, an uprising was hastily organized to take control of the aircraft at 9:57. Within minutes, the passengers had fought their way to the front of the cabin and began breaking down the cockpit door. Fearing their captives would gain the upper hand, the hijackers rolled the plane and pitched it into a nosedive, crashing into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, southeast of Pittsburgh at 10:03 a.m. The plane was about 20 minutes away from reaching D.C. at the time of the crash, and its target is believed to have been either a Capitol building or the White House. As the fires continued to burn inside the World Trade Center towers, the structural integrity of the buildings eventually began to weaken. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed after burning for less than an hour. The collapse sent massive clouds of dust and debris across lower Manhattan, and just over half an hour later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower also collapsed. The destruction of the towers resulted in the deaths of thousands of people, including office workers, emergency responders, and rescue personnel. During the events that played out, emergency responders displayed extraordinary courage. Firefighters, police officers, and medical teams rushed into dangerous conditions to help evacuate people and provide aid to the injured. Sadly, hundreds of these responders lost their lives while attempting to rescue others. However, their bravery became one of the most powerful stories to emerge from the tragedy. In the hours and days following the attacks, rescue workers searched the wreckage of the World Trade Center site, which soon became known as Ground Zero. People across the country gathered for vigils and memorial services to honor those who had died. These attacks deeply affected communities throughout the United States and around the world. Around 3,000 people had lost their lives. Meanwhile, governments and citizens around the world responded with messages of support and solidarity. Many countries held moments of silence and public memorials, while for the first time in its history, NATO invoked Article 5 of its founding treaty, declaring that an attack against one member nation was an attack against all members. This decision started the War on Terror. Military operations began in Afghanistan in an effort to dismantle al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban government that had provided support to the group. These actions marked the beginning of a long period of international conflict and counterterrorism operations. The attacks also led to major changes in security procedures. Airports introduced stricter passenger screening, new identification requirements, and enhanced monitoring systems. In the United States, the TSA, or as it's known, the Transportation and Security Administration, was created to oversee aviation security. Today, the victims of 9/11 are remembered through memorials and annual ceremonies. At the site of the former World Trade Center, the National 9/11 Memorial features 2 large reflecting pools built in the footprints of the original towers. The names of every person who died in the attacks are engraved along the memorial's edges. Each year, on September 11th, ceremonies are held to read the names of the victims and honor their memory. More than 2 decades later, the legacy of 9/11 continues to shape the world. The attacks changed how governments approach national security, intelligence cooperation, and emergency preparedness, while they also influence international politics and global conflict. At the same time, the building of the One World Trade Center at the World Trade Center site represents resilience and determination in the face of tragedy.